So, g'day, Dave. We've talked before about new life builders, people in their 60s and 70s building something new instead of winding
Yeah.
down. How do you think this concept is evolving in an AI-driven world?
Well, it is. And thanks for asking me back, Campbell. It's always great to have a chat with you, mate. One of the interesting things to me is that I constantly on LinkedIn, a bit on Facebook, other social platforms, see these ads, which are basically, most 20-year-olds are now building new platforms of their own using AI. But if you're over 50, and sometimes it's if you're over 40, you probably have no idea how to use AI or whatsoever. So sign up for this course, right? And I keep on looking at that. And at 69, I'm going, well, I've been using AI for 10 years. So, what does that mean? Um, I always go back to, I think I've talked to you about this before. The message I always give people is if you're thinking about somebody who's in their mid 50s, like you, or, my age or older, we've been through so many technology changes, adapting to technologies. And people often forget that we've learned to use new technologies, not just when we were in our 20s, but, in our 40s, we learned to use, or yours probably late 30s, whatever, we learned to use mobile phones, right? I always use the example that I'm old enough to remember when Excel was invented and introduced to companies. And two things happened. One was the company, a big ad agency that I was working for. I went to the chief finance officer for Australia at the time and said to him, this Excel thing, are we using that? And he goes, we're thinking about it, whether or not it can be really useful, right? 6 months later, he was actually making not only the people in the finance department, but everybody in the agency was going to in-house classes on how to use it in their job. Same experience is happening with AI in many organizations now, right? The other thing that I always remember is I put together a proposal for Nescafe, which was one of our biggest clients at the time. And the proposal was this: there's this new thing called Excel, which is all about uh, a piece of software that helps you manage your accounts or look at a bunch of data and very quickly get to what the data means. So why don't we do this? We could buy the rights to embed into Excel so that every time you reached, you put in all your profit and loss and you get to the balance, there would be a little ad that say, now's the time for a Nescafe. And it was totally rejected. And the reason it was rejected was, oh, yeah, but the people that will use this sort of thing, they're quite conservative and they're probably older. Now, they meant older as in late 30s or 40s, but they'll never catch on. This thing will never
Yeah.
catch on. Now, of course, yes, it's being replaced now, but for the last 30 years, could you do business without Excel sheets? I'm sure you used them your whole work life, right?
Mm.
So now we're seeing this with AI. And the truth is that it depends on what level you mean. Are you talking about people developing their own AI platforms and agents, or people learning to use others? And a very simple example, GPT or Perplexity. Basically, you don't even have to type now because, of course, you can download the vocal thing for these things. So you can just ask it the question, right?
Mm.
So what are you telling me that anybody over 55 say can't do that? Come on, I mean, I'm sure you use AI in some way in your own business, one way or another, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure your clients, we were talking to before we started recording, some of your clients, right? RACQ, right? Of course they use AI, right? In different ways. Um, does it mean that a 65-year-old can't learn to do this? Well, no, because they've simplified a lot of these things down. They're literally for dummies, right? So it's not an
Mm.
age thing. It's about if you've got an IQ of about 80, you could probably figure this out, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the opportunities are there. I think, as always, the big difficulty is the language you use with people. If you, first of all, if you tell people you're too old to understand it, you either go one way or the other. You say, fuck you, I'm going to learn, excuse the language, I'm going to do it. Or you go, oh shit, this is going to be too hard, oh, damn it. But the other thing is explaining what the opportunity is. You know, people don't take up technologies for business if they don't understand how it's going to help them.
Mm.
So the providers of these technologies have just got to be able to explain, like, this is going to make you more efficient because of doing this. This is going to help you do this. Guess what? You'll be able to compete with a 35-year-old by doing this, right? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I love it, and particularly picking up your point about being adaptable, and having already had all that lived experience as well. AI is just another tool to be
Yeah.
used, and I think it's, as you say, it's the framing of that.
Well, think about the simple thing of, I can't remember how old Zoom is, right? That we're recording this on, but at some point, I had to learn to use Zoom. Now, when I did that, let's say it was in the last 10 years, I was already close to 60, right? Um, so I was capable of doing that, and now I can pretty much do what I need to do on Zoom for different things, different types of meetings, running them, hosting them, setting up different things. Of course we can learn to do this stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and
if you're asking me to be an AI developer, well, that's nothing to do with age. That's just because I'm an idiot and I just can't figure out the math.
yes, and
But at my physical prime, I couldn't do that either, man. It's like,
no, it's the difference between being able to create the tool or use the tool.
yes.
And I think that's good. So and with that, I think AI has the potential to empower older workers, rather than it being a risk of sidelining them. The deep experience, that lived experience, I think, certainly older
Yeah,
workers.
that's certainly true. That's one of the things that I think is um, only really beginning to be understood. And if I look at the industries that I sort of work in, the market research business, for example, um, I've been using market research specific AI driven platforms for a decade. For the first 7 years of that, whenever I got up at a conference and talked about my experiences and cases, people go, yeah, but it's not really market research, it's AI. Now I go to the exact same conferences and everybody's talking about using AI for this stuff, right? But one of the differences is now I'm being asked to get up there and talk about, from my deep experience, not just of AI, but of market research and the market and the way things work, is what have I learned that can help people adapt or use it better or understand how to differentiate themselves by their usage. So, to
Mm.
exactly your point, my experience of adapting to new technologies now allows me to sit back and go, guys, yes, it's great that you're all using this platform, but by the way, if you all use the exact same platform in exactly the same way, then Campbell has no individual value, right?
Yes.
Because he's replaceable by 50 other people, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think that's a really good point. As we always knew about computers, garbage in is garbage out. It's what you feed it, and if you have that wealth of experience, of lived experience, you can ask better questions. The results that you get out of any of those large language models is entirely dependent on what
On
questions you
the
ask of it.
right, and the questions, how you prompt, it's amazing. If you think back 3 years ago, when we used the word prompt, it was very, very rare, and it was nothing to do with what we mean by prompting now, right? Although I do use the example in the market research world, qualitative researchers have been prompters. That's what qual research was all about. Never asking a direct question, but prompting some discussion, right? Well, now we've taken that skill and we've massified it to everybody in theory about, are you
Mm.
going to prompt GPT to give you an answer that's different? But the other thing too is experience teaches you that, to go back, whether it's using Excel, or Word or PowerPoint or any other new technology, experience teaches you that you have to learn how to deliver the results
Mm.
it in a different. So we do exactly the same prompts, we get exactly the same answers, but what I do with it is slightly different to what Campbell does with it, because our experiences will be different. But more importantly, I consciously do that to make sure it sounds like Dave's individual brand, or my company's individual brand's interpretation of this, the way we look at the world, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
very much.
I call this. There's a hashtag I developed, so and it's called uh, individual thought, right? And so the whole idea is that you have to add in something, no matter what age you are. But perhaps we have an advantage because we've seen so much change in thinking about, well, how do I make that mine? You know.
Yeah, d definitely. I 100% agree. If you don't bring your own brand, for want of a better term, to the output of any of these things or help interpret what it is. And then, that's where I think older workers could become more like mentors or interpreters of AI systems in this way. It's not
Mm,
about being replaced by it. So who can use the tool most effectively? Coming back to your Excel spreadsheet thing, if you don't put in good quality data and then interpret the result of that and be able to present that to others well.
exactly. Exactly. Right. And I'm sure as you're doing what you do and you're helping with people with their qualifications, of course, if part of me being a manager, for example, right, is everybody can read the textbooks on personnel management. Everybody can go and do the courses, right? Uh, but what really becomes useful is when you have some individual traits about it, right? You know, uh, I love to take on board the fact there's not a day goes by that I mean, I was lucky enough to work across many countries with people that had absolutely from zero to better English than I do. And every single day I get contacted by people all over Asia. Oh, Dave, just wondering how things. Dave, remember when you taught me this 20 years ago? Dave, you remember when that sort of respect comes from me not just doing it by the textbook, but having some sort of individualized input into it, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's so valuable. One of the other terms that you've coined is retryement, and thinking about that in a tech shifting world, you'd coined that phrase retryement to describe people who aren't retiring but retrying something different. So, in the context of rapid tech change, how are retriers redefining success and purpose?
Uh, Part of it is keeping up, right? Obviously. So retirement can mean simple things. It could be that you are retired, but you're retrying learning to play guitar again because you gave up when you were 21 or when you got your first full-time job, right? I use that example. But retirement can also mean things like, look, I want to make myself a bit more relevant in today's workforce. Well, regardless of your age, there's a whole bunch of white collar jobs, at least, that if you don't have some basic knowledge of how to use basic AI tools, there's somebody else that can. And they may be younger, older, they might be 30 years younger than you, and they might be 5 years older than you. But there's some basic needs for that, right? And that's just the languages of business today, right? Those sorts of things. But the other thing too is that obviously for older people, and let's say people over 60, a lot of talk in the last 6 to 12 months about in Australia, America, basically the Western developed markets, about people over 60 starting businesses or taking their experience. And we've all seen the stats from Harvard or somewhere that says that 50% of all successful new businesses are started by people over 50, right? Uh, there's a higher rate of long-term success if you're a founder over 50, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're a founder or you're wanting to try to found or redirect or restart your own business in today's world, then you've got to use the right tools. And the right tools 30 years ago was using Excel to do your accounts.
Mm.
The right tools today is different sorts of platforms that could be simple things for asking for information, in simplified ways, and it could be sort of slightly more complex tools like ones that can design simple packaging things or changes and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, no, I like that, and I think there's that natural curiosity as well. It's people are curious about new things, new tools, and I think the way that so many AI tools are packaged up now, it's not something that you need to go and learn, like computer programming language.
Right,
It's
right.
if you use Google now, well, it's pretty much powered by Gemini, and so hey, you're using AI,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think
And this is one of the things you're right. One of the interesting things I find when I give talks about this, I have to remind people that a lot of people are using AI tools that, and they don't even realize it's an AI tool, or what's an LLM. Without getting into the LLM versus AI definitions and stuff, they're probably more likely LLMs, but the fact is they still don't know that, right? And so you're right. Google made this conversion, and so you are actually working with an LLM whenever you ask Google a question, right?
mm,
Um, and so, okay. So you're already, and that's as you know from the work you do, it's making people aware of what they do know sometimes more than teaching them something new, right? But making them aware of the fact, well, you already do that sort of. What you need is to maybe clarify how you use it, or learn the ways to talk about what you're doing in the right way, right? And that's an experience factor.
yeah,
Um,
a language thing, understanding the language, the terminology.
Yes, yeah, when I first moved to Asia and started international jobs, I learned very quickly that I had to use I'd worked for an American company for nearly 10 years in Australia, but when I went international, now I was reporting directly to people in New York, so I had to use American business terminology, right? Which was, learning things. I remember the first time somebody in a meeting was going on about the North Star, and I'm sitting there going, uh, we're talking about astronomy. I had never heard that term, right? In a business sense, it was like, I know what the North Star is, in terms of astronomy. What's that got to do with? And it was a meeting selling about new ads for Coca-Cola. Well, what the heck is this about, right?
Yeah.
But you had to learn that stuff. And in the same way, we have to learn the terminologies a bit. That it's a prompt. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, okay. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's sort of asking a question, but it's framing the question in a way, in a certain type of way, right? Those sorts of things.
And that's really interesting. That got me thinking about the output of some of these. Well, ChatGPT, for example, the output after you give it a prompt, an experienced person will be able to contextualize that output. And that comes back to what we spoke about earlier. Someone with more lived experience will be able to interpret that output and contextualize it for their who they're speaking to. Like you're talking about your marketing, people. You can't just rely on the output from some AI generated thing. It's the same if you're asking it to generate an image. You need to be able to interpret that and contextualize it for your listeners.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or not long ago, somebody I know in Bangkok, where I normally live, asked one of these platforms for business purposes. They said, "Who would be uh, an influencer that I should consider, given that my business is in X, Y, and Z?" Now, the list came back, and the thing with 10 seconds comes back with a list of 10 Thai influencers in vaguely in that category, right? Uh, but as this person said, as soon as he looked at the list, he went, well, you know, that one would be wrong because of some background experience that's gone on. That one, visually, just so somebody else who didn't know the marketplace or those influences might go, oh, let's start from the top one and work our way down. And the other thing is, like with influencers, people get deceived by the numbers, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, 500,000 followers must go
That
for
means
them, right?
good. Yeah.
Yeah, but 500,000 may mean nothing or it may be a lot. But the other thing is that, well, what do you mean 5,000 followers as opposed to people that actually do something? Is that 500,000 people that do something, or
Yeah.
500,000 people that are just sort of vaguely entertained by the messaging? Two different things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I 100%. Thinking about what we do at Knowledge Access, and AI and older workers. We work with people getting formal recognition for their decades of workplace skill, and we do that through recognition of prior learning assessment. Do you see, or what might be some tools like AI that can help them express or even discover their value in new ways?
Well, I think one of the things is to use those sort of what we now sort of see as basic tools like the GPTs, the perplexities, etc. Are you asking yourself? Look, one of the examples I always give, Campbell, is, and I don't know if you've done this exercise. If you go to 3 or 4 of these different platforms, right, and you say, "Tell me about Campbell Elton," right? Now, I honestly don't know, mate, how many Campbell Eltons there are in Australia or around the world by that name, right? I mean, you're the only one I know, okay? But there might be 10, there might be only one. I recently discovered there are 3 other Dave McCaughans in Australia, or David McCaughans, right? No relative that I know of, but they just are. I always thought mine was a very rare name. It is relatively outside of Belfast, where my dad came from. It is a rare name.
Yep.
But what I find interesting is simple exercises. Go and ask these platforms about yourself.
Mm.
Look at the differences, right? When I do the exercise, I do it every 6 months, and I always find that at least one of the descriptions I've got to go, where'd they get that from, right? Now I know, having done this for over a decade, in the early days, there's a guy named Dave McCaughan who is a professor of computer science at the University of Calgary in Canada. And it would confuse us. And if you asked it, tell me about Dave McCaughan, it would be facts about him and me. And that's how I discovered he existed. And that's where I got in touch with him to find out he's no relative that we can figure out. We just happen to have the same name. And he's the only common name that popped up, right? Later on, when only a few years ago, I found there was a guy actually working in the advertising industry like me in England, but he's about 30 years younger than me, right? And it would our CVs, depending on which platform, would drop in experiences of his onto
Yes.
mine, right?
Yep.
But it's worthwhile doing those simple exercises to find out if somebody does a search on you, what is it saying, right? In the same way that we all learned 10 years ago, if I go for a job and somebody searches Facebook for me, is it going to show up? Is it going to show up me getting absolutely drunk last night just after Queensland won?
Questionable political memes.
Political mean. Well, and we learned 10 years ago as employers, or I'm sure the people that you're coaching, a lot of them went through that exercise 10 years ago of saying, "Oh, geez, I better be careful what I post there," right?
Yeah.
Or
100%.
but do those exercises and be aware of that, and then use those as examples to think about. Now, if it's just that's me, now what happens with the brands I work with, either that I'm employed by or I'm partnering with? How is that being referenced? What's the messaging coming through? Are there things that I should be doing? So if I'm working if I come to you and I say, look, I want to get my qualifications recognized, XYZ, then it would be great to be able to say, look, what I've learned is how to take what's said about my company and reframe that so that when people search, something else comes up, right? What does that mean? Now, if you're in a marketing job in a company, I hope to God you're doing that. Otherwise, to me, you just don't understand marketing, right? It may be different if you're the engineer, but you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then that whole thing of, as you think about your qualification, are you using these platforms to first of all understand, well, what is recognized as the good parts of the qualification, right? What is it about that role that people are really looking for, understanding, etc.
Or valuing.
And
Yeah.
valuing, right? And then asking the question, and this is sometimes sounds weird, but asking the platform how people in positions like yours are using the platform,
Mm.
right? It's a bit. Imagine if you go to Campbell, you do the process, you get this qualification, and you say, like I'm 53, I want to go for the next level of job. So I get this, and I get the qualifications, and I go along, and then I find out that the guy they were asking for stuff that
Mm.
where's that come from, right?
Mm.
Well, this is what these tools can help you understand, right?
Yeah. 100%. Dave, great to chat. Now, just one final question without notice, but just I guess to wrap the whole thing up in terms of new life builders in the age of AI, what might be a pitfall? So if someone was watching this and they're a new life builder or they're, in that retirement phase, what might be a pitfall that you've noticed with AI in terms of AI that they might be aware of?
A pitfall of AI is that you've got to remember to what you said before, it's rubbish in, rubbish out, right? So when you think about AI tools of any type, so let's say you're going to use one of the common AI tools now that you can use to make your photos look better, right? Too often people in older age groups will talk about the fact, yeah, but that just makes it look fake. Or, this is all about fakery. AI is all about and that sort of thing. And you've got to buy into the fact that how fake it is up to you to control, right? You don't have to turn everything into trying to make Campbell look like Brad Pitt at 22, right? That's just called deception, right? You look like a lot like him now, but not at 22. But people have to. What I hear all the time is, "Oh yeah, but these tools are really about faking the world. They're not really about genuine thing." And no, no, no. That's no different, for example, than when you learned to use PowerPoint, right? I'm old enough. When I went to university, we actually had a course at university on how to write overhead projection sheets on the old floppy projection sheets
Yeah, yeah.
with colored pens,
Yep.
right? And then I got a job and they introduced PowerPoint software, and I was the first person in the company to use that, right? And everybody thought I was a genius, right? I didn't develop it. We just
Yeah,
download.
I'm just using it.
We bought a package and put it in the computer. What's a computer, right? It was
Yeah.
that sort of thing, right? Well, all these years later, people just got to keep that sort of
Mhm.
how you use it is important. Learn to use it. Be open to learning to use these things. And then how much you use it, well, that's up to you because that's part of your personal branding. And some of us want to be seen as less technologically competent than others. That's fine. If some of us want to say, well, I don't want to use it for X, Y, and Z, well, that's fine. That's up to you. But just be aware of what the market is saying and is moving to stay relevant.
Awesome. Great advice, Dave. As always, great to chat.
Great to talk to you, mate. Cheers.